We have plenty to talk about here in today's video, including some more trade talk as we get closer to the beginning of the NHL season. We obviously had a trade today involving the Montreal Canadiens, which freed up a lot of cap space. We'll take a look now at what they might do with that space and a subsequent move to add to their center depth. Plus, we have some more trade talk as well around the San Jose Sharks. Some big updates on Connor McDavid. He had some more interesting comments to speak to the media here today. Plus, we also had some very interesting comments from Lane Hutson's father on a podcast talking about the possibility of Lane Hutson maybe looking to play for Team Canada since he's a dual citizen. We also have some updates around the NHL on a big signing in Calgary with Connor Zary. Some PTOs were announced today in Minnesota and New Jersey, and another longtime player has retired. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have plenty to discuss here today. It's been a very interesting news day. Of course, you probably saw earlier that the big trade that finally went down involving the Carey Price contract and the Montreal Canadiens and the San Jose Sharks. In case you missed that, there is a dedicated video on the channel from earlier tonight, so certainly check that out if you haven't already done so. However, we'll get into the subsequent what comes next for the Habs here in just a little bit. But first up today, I want to start with another veteran player announcing his retirement, and that's Edmonton Oilers' Derek Ryan. Of course, Derek Ryan, to me, in case you don't know the full story and history behind Ryan and his hockey career, he's the true definition of perseverance and not giving up and continuing to pursue your dreams is even later into your life. Derek Ryan might not have had a superstar career, but he didn't make his NHL debut until he was age 29. He was not far off from age 30 when he finally got his first opportunity. He ended up playing 606 games over 8 years. Started as a member of the Carolina Hurricanes, then of course played for both teams in his home province of Alberta between Calgary and Edmonton. Obviously has finished up here with the Oilers over the last few years. But Derek Ryan is just one of those players that never gave up. He had a decent junior career running in WHL. Then, of course, from there, he ended up, he's one of the, also a rare product to make to the NHL for playing Canadian university hockey. Now, Canadian university hockey is not the same level as U.S. college hockey. It's generally speaking, the feeder system into that league is quite often major junior players who never had a chance to turn pro. Typically, that's a lot of those players. And now they sometimes do lead to other pro opportunities, most of which would probably end up in Europe. You get the occasional one that does make a late blooming type of run to the NHL, which Derek Ryan did in a rare circumstance. I remember like Steve Ruchin, if you remember him, he's another rare example of that made it to the NHL here as well. But he played 4 years at the University of Alberta in their Golden Bears program. A great program there, University of Alberta, along with like UNB here close to me here in New Brunswick, two of the best schools in the entire country when it comes to having just an excellent program and a consistent winning product on the ice each and every year. So after doing 4 years of a junior, 4 years of university hockey, so at least he got an education as well. Then he went and played in Europe for 4 years after that. Then he finally, after that, so 4 years as junior, 4 years of Canadian university hockey, 4 years in Europe, and then he gets a one-way AHL contract so that he wouldn't have to play in the East Coast League. Spent time, and that was with the Hurricanes affiliate. And then from there, after one season, the next year he played a little bit in the AHL, but most of what's in the NHL, and he never looked back. He stayed in the NHL the rest of the way. Like I said, playing 606 games for Carolina, Calgary, and Edmonton. Derek Ryan's a smaller player as well, and that's certainly probably contributed to teams not taking a chance on him. But like I said, just for, especially if you're, I mean, I know the demographics of the people who typically watch this channel aren't super young, a little bit more of a mature age hockey fan. But for people out there, if you are, in your teens or you're in your early 20s and you still have aspirations to make to the NHL and you're still playing at a relatively high level, don't give up, because Derek Ryan's a prime example of how you just never know. And he didn't give up. And like I said, he was 29 going on 30 30 when he finally made his NHL debut. And then he ended up playing till age 38. So it can happen to anybody if you just continue fighting for your dreams. It's just that simple. So congratulations to Derek Ryan on making it and pursuing and continuing to stick with it and carving out a late blooming but yet nice, fairly successful over 600 game career. Now, as I mentioned, we got a bunch of other news here today. We got a couple of batches of PTOs. We have one in Minnesota and a few in New Jersey. The Minnesota Wild have brought in Brett Leeson on a PTO, of course, formerly of the Ducks and the Capitals. Leeson, somebody who's got a decent size, can kill penalties. So the Wild will give him a look in training camp to see if they want to consider signing him or not. And New Jersey had announced a variety of PTOs, including a former Devil, Kevin Rooney, who will be there. So Kevin Rooney, Luke Glendening, Adam Schell, and Georgi Romanov. So all four of those players will end up in New Jersey's training camp for an opportunity to try to earn a contract here as well. And a fairly big signing in Calgary today. Connor Zary and the Flames have finally settled. The RFA forward gets his new contract. As we had mentioned the other day, the rumors around this contract negotiation were that they were probably going to end up settling on a 3-year deal. Zary, I think, was pushing for a longer-term contract. Calgary wanted shorter term. It looks like the Flames kind of got their way here. But a 3-year bridge at $3.775 million. So for what he did last year, I think it's decent for sure. I can understand why the player was pushing for more, wanting that job security, but I think the Calgary Flames want to see a little bit more from him before they give that longer term, bigger money commitment. Now, as I mentioned, we had a couple of players today I want to talk about with really just based on comments, and that was Connor McDavid, and then we'll get into Lane Hutson. Now, Connor McDavid, of course, as the Oilers and like many teams are having what they call their captain skates, preparing for training camp in the upcoming NHL season. And McDavid's been nice enough to speak to the media here a couple of days in a row. One of the things he said today, though, if Oilers fans were not nervous before today, I think you have every right to be nervous. And for the first time during this whole ordeal of the period that McDavid's been eligible to sign an extension since July 1, I've always said I really believe he's going to sign. I still think that's most likely going to happen. But for the first time, I might actually have a small little bit of doubt. It's starting to creep in there. Not saying that I'm still leaning towards the fact that he's going to sign. I don't think he's going to sign long term. It's definitely going to be shorter term. I think 2, 3, or 4 years at most. But yeah, Connor McDavid again made the comments of the fact that his hockey has been his whole life. He's worked really hard for where he's at in his career, and he feels he's earned the right to take his time, and he absolutely has. He's become the greatest hockey player in the world during his time here in the NHL, and really, he absolutely has every right to get this right and make a right decision and to take his time. Like he said, it's a big deal. It's a big commitment. It's a lot of impact on not only his career, but his personal life as well. And he wants to make sure from both his personal perspective and the team's perspective that they get the right deal that makes sense for all involved. But one of the comments he made today that kind of surprised me was asking about what options were on the table. And he said, all options are on the table. Short term, long term, no term. He actually said no term. I know Elliot Friedman had a new podcast come out today, first one in a few weeks. His comment on it was that basically he feels, from what he's heard and what he knows and heard behind the scenes, that McDavid isn't so much concerned about the upcoming season, that he says that he has strong belief that this is a good team and he'll have a chance to win this year. It's not so much this year. It's the future. Looking at the core group of this team, yes, McDavid still in his prime, Leon still very much in his prime, but some of the other key members of that core are getting older. And not so much now, but in 3, 4, 5 years, are they going to be able to continue winning or having being a contender and have a shot at being one of the top teams year after year after year 3, 4, 5, 6 years into the future. That's what McDavid is trying to figure out and trying to see the vision and everything that this team is going to go through if he believes that far ahead. And I think that's going to determine what kind of term he decides that he wants to do. And we'll see from there. But ultimately, you look at some of the key members of the core. Zach Hyman, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Matthias Ekholm, all 30-plus years of age. They're already into their early, to getting towards the mid-30s on a couple of them. And 3 or 4 years down the road, they're now going to be in their late 30s. Are they still going to be playing at that kind of a higher level? They're important players. So if they're not going to be there, who's going to replace them? There's a lot of questions. You look at the goaltending situation is not settled long term. If you had a stud goalie, 26 years old, signed for 8 years, probably feel a little bit different about it. But you don't. You have Stuart Skinner, who, he's done some good things, but there's always that seed of doubt with Stu, and he's not signed long term. There's a lot of volatility around that position, right? So I can understand kind of what McDavid's going through, but the big factor here that he said, short term, long term, no term. And I think everybody just went, oh. So, like Elliot said on his podcast, which it seems to be the general consensus right now, is that he believes more than ever before the odds of McDavid not having an extension in place by the time the season starts is very high. It'd almost be surprising at this point if he did get it done. So, like I said, that seems to be the holdup in a lot of the questions and things that McDavid's working through. And I tell you, there's already a lot of people in Toronto looking forward to the fact that he might be a free agent next year. And yes, I've seen a lot of Toronto fans making this about the Leafs. Not shocking. But, really, there's 31 other NHL teams that should be looking at this saying, that's something that Elliot mentioned on his podcast too. He's like, you got to be looking at this saying, is there any truth to this? Is there any chance at all we could have a shot at maybe signing him next year? Or if he decides, that he's not going to want to play in Edmonton forever, in a year or two, it could be a trade for him. How could this work? I mean, every team would want to get this guy on their team, right? So it's going to be an interesting situation to see how it all plays out, but that's kind of where McDavid is kind of working through. Now, on Lane Hutson himself hasn't really said anything that's getting people's attention, nothing controversial, nothing really at all. Lane Hutson's been doing his thing, getting ready for the season. However, his father, Rob, made an appearance on a podcast talking to Grant McKay, who covers prospects. And one of the topics, of course, they covered, the main one being Lane Hutson's omission or snub or whatever you want to call it from the Team USA Olympic Hockey Orientation Camp. Of course, they invited 16 defensemen to come to this camp and we know they're going to all be considered for Team USA for the Olympic team. If you're not invited, it doesn't mean you can't have a shot at making this team, but you probably have an uphill battle that you're not only going to have a really good start to your season, but you're going to have to impress the brass of Team USA even more than these guys, right? And in some cases, a lot of people, I think there's probably a difference of opinion out there on Lane Hutson. Yes, he had a terrific rookie season last year, and he seems like he's got a bright future, really good player. Clearly didn't impress Bill Guerin and Team USA enough to be considered here. Now, when I will admit, though, as much as I never expected Lane to be on Team USA for the 2026 Olympics, I am surprised they went that deep of a 16-man decor invitation to the orientation camp, and he wasn't one of them. Now, if they only invited 8 or 9, okay, I can understand maybe he didn't get the invite, right? You look at the way USA and Canada went about their orientation camps quite differently. Canada didn't go with such an expansive roster. They took a much smaller group. Now, there were still more players than you're going to need, so they're not all going to be on the team, but a greater chance of them all. There was basically everybody or pretty well everybody, I think everybody, I can't remember right off, from 4 nations and some extras, right? But they didn't go with quite as big of a group. Whereas, like I said, the Americans took 16 defensemen. So, like, if you would have told me when it came out, without seeing it, Team USA just announced their orientation camp roster. There's actually 16 defensemen invited. Do you think Lane Hutson is one of them? I would have said, well, yeah. Like I said, would I pick him in the top 6? No, probably not right now. Would I put him in the 7-8 spot? Maybe not. But like after that, I'd be like, okay, yeah. Like depending on how many extra guys you can take, I think he has to be in the conversation. But like I said, obviously, I think a big part of what the feeling is with USA hockey is they have Quinn Hughes, they have Zach Werenski. He's also, Hudson's also a left shot D, mostly known for his offense. They don't want redundancy. He's small in stature. They probably want a different type of defenseman to play on that left side in the third pair. Okay, I get it. You need different types of guys. You need guys that are more two-way or more defensive, or you want some more size. Like all teams kind of, look at the way a lot of NHL teams kind of structure their decor, right? They're not all going to have, 3 small left shot skating puck moving defensemen. You're going to have a combination of size, speed, skill, grit, physicality, all that stuff. So I kind of get it, but yet, like I said, I don't in a way. But the comments from Rob Hutson, to me, I'm not fond of what he had to say. But here, I'll just show you the quote here. Basically, he says, I think our family has made a commitment to Team USA throughout the years, and I don't know what Bill Guerin was thinking. I don't know him, and he probably doesn't know Lane. We have to live with how they see it, but we don't have to agree with it. This fuels anyone, especially someone as competitive as Lane. There's no animosity towards it. You never know what happens in the future. My boys are also Canadian. So, okay, he says that he doesn't know what Guerin was thinking, but he doesn't know him. He probably doesn't know Lane. That's kind of unnecessary. Like, to say that, I don't know what he was thinking. The fact that he says it fuels anyone, especially somebody like Lane who's so competitive, that part's fine. I'm sure it will fuel him. He's probably going to go into the season with a chip on his shoulder, which if you're Montreal or a Montreal fan, you're probably happy with that in a sense, because you want to give him another reason to prove people wrong. But I don't know. To me, I'm just not a fan of parents. Like, this is not Pee Wee hockey. This is not participation trophy level stuff. This is the Olympics we're talking about. If I am Lane Hutson's dad, I'm staying out of this. I'm not commenting. I'm not doing interviews. I don't want to say anything that might, make things more difficult for my son. I'm not saying anything that I'm going to embarrass my son or create unnecessary attention or anything. I would just kind of shut the heck up. That's what I would do if it were me. I just don't know that him making these comments is really helpful in any way, shape, or form. I know Brad Marchand has already commented on one of the Instagram posts with the comments here from Hudson's dad, and he said he tagged Lane and told him to get his dad in check or something like that. Like, it's just not, I don't know, not a good look. Now, the fact that it might be surprising to some if you didn't know, but yeah, the Hutson boys are theoretically dual citizens. Their father, Rob, was born in Canada, was born in Manitoba. So, he technically could have. Now, however, they have both represented Team USA in the past. And with the IIHF, they do have rules in place, and there is a process in place as well if you want to request a transfer for what country you're going to represent internationally. Of course, you have to have citizenship to that country as well. And it's not the first time this has ever happened. You look at like Brett Hull, was Canadian, born in Canada. Of course, he had one parent American, one Canadian, born in Canada, but ended up transferring to Team USA after getting snubbed from Team Canada. Peter Nedved went through this back in the 90s as well. He was born, he was dual between Canada and I think at the time it was Czechoslovakia. And there's been a couple of women players that have gone through it as well. But there is a process where you can request this change, but it's a long process. Like, you have to end up not playing international hockey for 4 years. So at this rate, the absolute earliest they could consider getting Lane Hutson even eligible to play for Team Canada would be 2020. Well, actually, sorry, it'd be 2030 because 2026 is the Olympics coming up, right? So he would have to not play in the upcoming Olympics, not play any world championships, and then request all that. And then by 2030, if he was approved, he could then be eligible for Canada. So part of the reason I think why he wasn't considered in the first place is because he didn't go to the Worlds for Team USA. They seem to hold that quite personal. And not to mention, the Team Canada is pretty stacked as well. So I don't know that his odds of making that team are really any better. Now, in 4 years' time, he's going to have a lot more NHL experience. He is going to have, being the prime years of his career, I would suspect that he would be in a much better spot. I mean, I can't say what the Team USA or Canada is going to look like in 4 years' time. I would think he'd have a much better chance at making either team at that point than he would right now. But I don't know. To me, the comments are they're unnecessary. Like, you don't really see, like, the only, like, Mitch Marner's dad was quite vocal. He's made a lot of comments about Mitch and stuff over the years. Like, it just, I don't know. I'm not a fan of it. I don't think it's really his place. I think he's bringing unnecessary attention to the fact that Lane was left off the orientation camp. And I just think it was a mistake. But let me know what you think. Should Lane Hutson or his brother Cole in the future consider their dual citizenship and trying to play for Team Canada? Do you think it would make them or help his chances of getting on the team better? Do you think because of the snub he should consider it? It's a long process. Let me know what you think, and also let me know what you think of the dad even doing a podcast and making the comments in the first place. So we'll see where we go. Now on the trade front, a couple quick things. I mentioned we saw the trade earlier between Montreal and San Jose. Another note on the Sharks, Dave Pagnotta, thefourthperiod.com, reporting today that a name that we're going to start hearing a lot more about in the rumor mill as the season gets ready to start up at training camp is defenseman Muriel Ferraro. He is most likely going to be traded out of San Jose this year. He's been in the rumor mill for about 2 years, like a lot of Sharks have been as they've gone through this process, except he hasn't been moved yet. So he said as the season starts, you're going to hear his name popping up. And the likely scenario you see on this unfold is that there's always teams that run into injuries and find themselves in a predicament, especially teams that are expected to be playoff teams or contenders, and maybe they could look to him for help if they run into that kind of scenario. But he is a player to watch that the Sharks are expected to move here. And because of the rule changes we're seeing this year, there is a lot of people that think we're going to see an increase in trade activity earlier in the season. Now, with Montreal's trade they made earlier today, as I mentioned with the Carey Price contract, they now have a lot more cap space, and there's obviously already been a lot of debate over what they may do with the newfound cap space. And well, now it's a realistic possibility of not only could they, but they really could now, right? Make a move. So there's a lot of debate. Are they going to make a move, or are they going to hold tight, be patient, and are they going to wait and see how things play out with Kirby Dach first? Is Dach going to be ready to start the season? What's his play going to be like? Is he going to be able to contribute, or are they going to have to pivot and go in a new direction? Could Dach himself be part of a trade if they do decide to make one? We know that they've been linked to a variety of players throughout the summer here for that potential number 2 center spot. I mean, there was a lot of chatter about Marco Rossi early on. Of course, he's signed a multi-year deal now with Minnesota, so that's less likely. Especially with Minnesota. I mean, some people are convinced that Minnesota will still likely trade Rossi at some point before that contract's expired, but Minnesota's going to want a hockey trade if and when they do that. And I don't know that Montreal is going to want to subtract from their roster here. I think they would want to add and maybe use picks and prospects as the trade bait if they do it, unless Dach himself is involved, and I don't know how Minnesota would feel about that. That would be a possibility, like a Dach for Rossi trade. That would be interesting. I don't know if both clubs would be intrigued by that. It's not the first time it's been mentioned, but it is out there. I mean, other names to watch that Montreal has been linked to include Pavel Zacha in Boston. Dmitry Voronkov in Columbus has also been mentioned before. Jared McCann out of Seattle has been mentioned. I think McCann's less likely from what we've kind of heard more recently. It sounds like the Seattle Kraken are more likely than not going to keep McCann, at least for the time being. That could change later in the year if they have another down season like a lot of people expect. But we will see. But, Doc for Rossi is an interesting thought. Zacha from Boston, Voronkov. Either way, the Habs have the space now to make a move. And they don't need to trade Doc to do that. But they can trade other assets to try to intrigue some of these teams here. Obviously, they want to make an addition. They don't necessarily have to make a subtraction now. Depending on what they bring in, though, maybe they do. But that gives them a good amount of cap space to begin the season with and get them out of LTIR, so it would be a whole different way of going about the cap situation this year. But let me know your thoughts on who Montreal should target. Should they consider a Rossi for Doc trade? Let me know your thoughts on Carey Price no longer being a Hab. I know Carey Price himself did also make a Twitter post earlier acknowledging the fact that he's been traded and that he'll always be a Hab. He said he's just a teal Hab for the time being. I know Marc-Edouard Vlasic also trying to be funny, made a post on Twitter as well, tagging Carey Price, saying that they just missed each other in transition. Obviously, Vlasic was bought out by the Sharks earlier this year. I'm sure he spends, obviously from Quebec, spends a lot of time there in the summer. They probably do know each other, and I'm sure they've played on international hockey together in the past years ago as well. And we're almost teammates, but not quite. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.